Hello everybody, hope you're all doing really well. I gotta be honest with you, I'm not too inspired today. The weather is absolutely miserable. It's quite warm, but it's just pouring rain. I'm in a pretty thick forest right now, so the rain's not too bad. I'm here with Gavin Hardcastle, and Gavin's been kind enough to show me around to some of his secret spots. So I guess that's to make up for last week. So we've come out to this another waterfall, and now of course waterfalls are probably the best thing to photograph when it's raining out. I've never been to this waterfall, I've never even heard of it. It's called Cumberland Falls. It's near Comox Lake. It's quite impressive to look at. What I really like about this spot is the moss on the rocks. It's just beautiful. And actually this little section here really caught my eye. So I'm going to try and give that a go. Now the only problem with this section here is that it's an awful lot of deadfall just above it. And I think down here I can get a composition looking up towards the main falls. But I need to clean up some of this deadfall. So that's what I'm going to do, try and get rid of some of that just to clean up the scene a little bit. Okay, after fussing around for quite some time, I think I might have found the composition. I've got to be honest with you though, it is really challenging with this rain coming down, trying to keep all my gear dry. So I'm a little bit worried about I'm going to get too much moisture on the front of my lens, but I'll give it a go. The other awkward thing is that I'm a little bit precarious here. If I fall back, I'm going to really hurt myself, so I have to be careful. Would it be nice just to move back just a little bit? But right now the conditions are really quite special because it's just so hazy and misty with all this moisture in the air. So it really adds to that West Coast feel. So I'll show you the composition I have, and hopefully it will work out without too much moisture on my lens. So as you can see, I have this log in the foreground. It kind of comes from the very corner here up, and then we have this nice waterfall in the middle here, and then of course we have the larger waterfalls in the background. So in theory it looks really nice. Now it does look like it's kind of over to the left just a little bit too much, but I kind of wanted to include this tree here, so maybe I'll take one without the tree and see if that works. Sorry about the moving back and forth here. I'm really kind of on the edge of a precipice here. All right. Now, as much as I enjoy putting together videos for YouTube, I am a photographer first, and sometimes I have a real hard time mixing the two up. I find that the video or videotaping gets in the way of my photography. So when I came out here with Gavin, I did take video, but I was more interested in trying to get a good composition. So I ended up with not so much video and just one image that I really like. So I decided to come back out to this waterfall, and we've just had tons and tons of rain, and as you can probably see, the creek is really swollen, so it looks quite different. Now sometimes that could be a good thing, and sometimes not such a good thing. Now I do know that Gavin told me that he came here in the summer and he was quite surprised because there was more water in the summer than there was on that particular trip just a couple of days ago. just said it was nicer to look at. And I've only just got here, but I think I might tend to agree. When we were here just the other day, there was a lot more rock showing, so you get a lot more texture and variability between the water and the landscape surrounding it. But now that there's so much water, it's just a big mass of white water surrounded by rocks, rather than having rocks interspread between the water. But I'm going to try and take some more images here. This section here of the waterfall is definitely the best part. I don't know if you can see this, but the waterfall goes up quite a ways, probably about 150, 200 feet, and it's just raging right now. It's really quite beautiful. Now, when I left this morning, it was quite sunny in Parksville, but of course, as soon as I got to Comox Lake, it just started to pour with rain. So I've been sitting in my car for the last hour or two, waiting for the rain to stop, and now it's just drizzling just a little bit. So hopefully I can get another composition out of this day, and I'll be happy. All right, so I'm going to see if I can find anything, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so this is the composition I have. I really like the waterfall in the foreground here. That really fills that corner in nice. And again, I've tried to fill the whole frame with the waterfall kind of zigzagging across the frame here. These two logs in the middle here, in the midground, I don't mind so much. It's this snag that's kind of going across the frame there. I don't know if you can see that. I might end up trying to clone it out if it's not too much of a problem. But like I said, the other two aren't a big deal. I don't know, it looks quite nice. I think I prefer the composition down lower, but it's definitely worth taking this image for sure.
Okay, now this is the final image, and I've brought it into Lightroom, and I've just kind of evened everything out, like the light, so it looks quite flat, almost HDR. And what I mean by that is I've brought down the highlights quite a bit, so there's no real bright spots, and then the shadows I've kind of opened up as well. I want to start off with a clean image where I can kind of enhance the shadows and highlights to my liking. Now, what I like about this composition is I really like this water flow at the bottom here. It fills in this corner nicely, so then as your eye goes up, you reach this log here, and it takes your eye across to the main waterfall. I also really like this log going across here, and then of course we have the boulder and a little bit of the main falls at the top. I didn't want to include the whole thing, otherwise that would just be too much busyness in the whole image. Now, you've probably noticed right off the bat that there are some distractions in this image, those being these sticks going right across the frame. They more or less kind of ruin the whole flow of the image. So what I decided to do was to attempt to clone them out, and I think I did a pretty good job. Now, this is the version where I've done quite a bit of dodging and burning to bring out some of the details and kind of lessen some of the distractions in the final image. So I've brightened up the water considerably in the foreground here, and you may have noticed straight off that I've also cloned out the two distractions here, and I think it works way better. I've also darkened some areas and brought out the moss in some of the boulders, like on the top here and on the side here. I've tried to lighten this boulder. The whole idea is to try and bring out the best of the scene and lessen the distractions of the whole scene. The one thing that I'm not keen on is this white area here. It's more or less a big blob, and you may be wondering, well, why did I use such a slow shutter speed? Well, it was actually really quite dark. I was using ISO 400 at I think around f11 or f13, something like that, and my shutter speed was still pretty long. So what I ended up doing was I took a number of shots at ISO 3200 for the water, and I managed to get the shutter speed up to 1/10 of a second so that I could paint some of those textures from those images into this image here. So this is the image before I painted some texture in there. This image here is the final image, and you'll notice that there's quite a lot more texture in the middle here, and I think it works much better. It just adds a little bit of interest. One thing you may have also noticed is that I've brightened up the logs considerably. There was quite a bit of shine on them from being wet, and I really wanted to enhance that, so I brightened them up quite a bit. So your eye goes from the corner here up to the logs, and then there's a little bit of interest here, and then finally we have the waterfall up here. So overall, I think it worked out really nicely. I still prefer the first image, but yeah, I'm quite happy with this one.
Okay, so I went down to the area where I was a couple of days ago, and I've taken more or less the same composition. It was really tricky because there's so much more spray right now. What's really interesting also is now it's cleared up and there's no clouds above, so it's actually got darker because there's no reflected light in here, and you can kind of see quite cyan in here. It's 1:30, so you know, in an hour and a half it'll start getting dark again. So the days are just too short for this kind of stuff. You have to get here really early. But it will be interesting to kind of compare the two. I suspect that my first version will be much nicer than this version, because in this version you can't see the log that draws your eye up the waterfall, and that was kind of an integral part of the composition in the first version. It's funny, Gavin and I were talking about this the other day, how important it is. If you see something worth photographing, it's to photograph it right there and then, rather than thinking to yourself, oh well, I'll come back you know, when it might be better, or another day, I just don't have time. Because 99% of the time you'll go back and it'll be quite different. Either a tree's fallen down or the light's very different. So if you do see something that you think might be worth photographing, it usually is. Occasionally you might go back and it'll be better, but you know, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I keep going back to the same locations over and over again, is because I know there's something there. But you know, on the first trip you might be lucky to capture something, but it's usually on the second or third trip that you really start to get to know the area and then come away with something that you really want. So I think even though it was pouring rain the other day, I think the conditions were better the other day than they are today. So thank you ever so much for watching again, and as always, if you enjoyed my video, please be sure to give me a thumbs up, and if you enjoy the content of my channel, be sure to subscribe. All right everybody, thanks ever so much, and hopefully I will see you next week. All right, bye for now.